All right, we are live with the Working Tools podcast. I am Stephen Chung, one of your co-hosts, and ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Working Tools podcast, a conversation about Freemasonry. Whoops, hang on a second here. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Working Tools podcast, a conversation about Freemasonry. Whoops, hang on a second here. And there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Working Tools podcast. Everybody has it playing. Hang on. Whoops, hang on a second here. And there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Working Tools podcast. Everybody has it playing. I'm going to have to close that window. Hang on a second here. No, I'm getting somebody else has got feedback going. Somebody else has the I'm going to have play in the background. There we go. All right. Okay, let's start that over. Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools podcast, a conversation about Freemasonry. I'm your co-host, Stephen Chung, past master of Prince Charles Lodge in Kelowna, British Columbia. And with me today is Connor Massey from the Vancouver Island, and David Colbeth from Washington, and he'll introduce our guest in a couple of moments. First, it's important to note that our opinions and our thoughts are our own and do not reflect those of the Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. If we ask that if you do enjoy this podcast, by all means, please like, share, comment, and review us in YouTube, as it does help with our ratings. We would sure appreciate it. And a little bit about my history for this topic. I'm a two-time past master counselor of Beaver chapter, past chapter dad of Ogopogo chapter. Like I say, past master of Prince Charles Lodge here in Kelowna, and past vice peace and grand master of the Scottish Rite in Valley of Vernon, 32nd degree master mason. And I'll now pass the intro over to Connor Massey.
Thank you, Steve. I'm Connor. I'm a Master Mason and officer of both Asher Lodge number 3 in Nanaimo, British Columbia, and Henderson Lodge number 84 in Victoria, British Columbia. On the topic of interacting with us while we are live, it is super important that if you want to interact with us live, you can do so in the live chat on YouTube, or you can do so on our Discord server, the link to which is down below. Now, with that said, I will allow Dave to introduce himself and then introduce our guest host for the day.
Thanks, Connor. Appreciate that. I'm David Colbeth. I'm a Master Mason in Washington State, and past master of my lodge, Auburn, Washington, King Solomon Lodge number 60. Also a 32nd degree Mason, and we can go on and on. I did remember to say I'm also a life member of Grand Mound Historic Lodge number 3. That was something I have getting to say, and it's kind of fun to be part of that. One of the first 3 original lodges in Washington State. It's my pleasure today to introduce a friend, we can say that in Masonry, but more importantly, a mentor of mine, most worshipful brother Jim V. Mendoza. Jim is a past master counselor in senior DeMolay since 1977. He received the degree of Chevalier in 1987 and the active Legion of Honor in 2002. Jim met his sweetheart Laura while he was at DeMolay, and she was with Job's Daughters. They have enjoyed a wonderful life, full life, enjoying their passion for musical theater. He faced a challenge in 2008 when Laura was diagnosed with breast cancer. Her strength inspired him to become a passionate advocate for awareness and his significant involvement with the Puget Sound Komen for the Cure. And I know we'll talk about that just a little bit. Jim became a Mason in 1997 and quickly served in various positions in his home lodge and his dedication to service throughout our jurisdiction and the extended Masonic family throughout the world, delivering a special message to our Canadian brothers. In 2013, Jim was elected as Junior Grand Warden to the Grand Lodge, Washington, and was installed into the Oriental Chair on June 11th, 2016. At his installation, Jim introduced a series of initiatives that he felt would help secure a positive foundation and advance the fraternity in Washington. These included a focus on central themes such as the quality of Masonic experience, leveraging technology, Masonic education, and development of future leaders. Now, as past Grand Master, Jim serves as the president of the Board of Directors of Washington Masonic Charities and is chairman of the Development Committee. We are pleased to welcome Most Worshipful Jim V. Mendoza.
Thanks, David. Just going to make one correction to that. The current president of Washington Masonic Charities is actually Larry Foley. As you know, you and I have both kind of, for lack of a better term, aged out of that board. But I still serve the board of directors. But yeah, I'm strictly as chair of the development committee. But I want to make sure that Larry gets his props because he's doing some great work as the current chairman. Yeah,
I see they were in Washington D.C. this week visiting and doing some things there. It looks like they're doing some amazing stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're working on the civility program with the Most Worshipful Brother Rush Savonia, past Grand Master out of California, and it's making a lot of headway.
What a neat program. I really enjoy that. I was fortunate to be part of, I posted on Facebook, they call it Watchdogs. It's Dad of Great Students, kind of an inaugural program in our, and I thought, gosh, wouldn't this be amazing to tie in the civility program with the Watchdogs program? And then I thought for some of that program is also designed to bring fathers or men into the schools. And so wouldn't it be cool to have Masons throughout the state and throughout the country to be part of that Watchdogs and bringing in civility? And my mind was racing a million miles an hour thinking about that stuff. And all the support that you've shown us over the years, and me especially, and helping to mentor me. And so very thankful for that.
Well, it's kind.
We were talking in the green room about a program that a message that you're putting together for the Grand Lodge of Oregon. Is that correct?
Kenton Lodge, number 145 down in Oregon, is this year has a program where they're bringing in past Grand Masters from up and down the West Coast to kind of provide a level of Masonic education for the brethren. As fate would have it, last month, Rush Savonia was there to talk about civility. I'm going to be going down in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to be sharing a program called Our Mighty Oaks Have Fallen. The premise behind it is that when you think about it, many of the leaders and mentors and role models that you and I and others have enjoyed over the course of time are going to their final reward. And as we start looking at this, we realize that we are our own front line. And so we're slowly but surely becoming those mighty oaks. And so as a result, what are our responsibilities to the fraternity? I'm looking forward to sharing my thoughts down there, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of those thoughts here as well.
I'm really looking forward to hearing that because, it's one of the most important things we have to remember as our membership grows in their senior years. And like in our lodge, we're actually going to write down some of these traditions so they don't get lost, and realizing that, half of our old guard is gone, and the younger old guard doesn't know everything. So, as much as they like to think they do every now and then, we don't. And so I think it's a very powerful message you have.
Just remember, Steve, that even though some of the mighty oaks are fallen, we still have Eric Anderson to look up to.
Right.
Most Worshipful, do you know, are those being recorded or videotaped at all, those messages?
I don't know if they're recording them or not. Obviously, I'll have and David, you'll find this to be a bit of a surprise because you've seen me speak before. I'll actually have written notes instead of just bullet points that on an index card. But no, I will. I'm looking forward to sharing that to sharing that document out there because while it's when we talk about when we talk about our mighty oaks, there's so much more than just the traditions of the lodge and how we do things. There's also how do we actually comport ourselves as Masons? How do we connect with brethren? Because you've heard me say this multiple times. We're in a highly connected society, but we're incredibly disconnected individuals. There's something about Freemasonry, meeting in a lodge room, meeting over a cup of coffee, meeting over dinner that is sadly becoming very, very unique. to be able to connect hand to hand, heart to heart, face to face, is something that I think is very, very important. And so that's going to be part of what I talk about. But a lot of that is actually inspired in part by two things. Number one, my mentor Bill Miller, because he had a similar program. But really, this is kind of strange, and it goes back to the ancientness of our fraternity. I'm inspired by the words of Marcus Cicero, who died in 43 BC. He talked about something called the 6 mistakes of man. And when you read those 6 mistakes of man and you kind of apply it to Freemasonry, one of the things you find is that we're still making the same mistakes. And Cicero wrote this thing 2,000 years ago. I mean, little things like the delusion that individual advancement is made by crushing, subduing, or silencing others. The tendency to worry about things that cannot be changed. Insisting that a thing is impossible because we cannot do it ourselves. Refusing to set aside trivial preferences. Neglecting development and refinement of the mind. And attempting to compel others to believe and live as we do. I think we're pretty good on 1 and 6, but in terms of the fact that we don't get caught in those traps, but it's the middle 4 that I think is our problem. And that's where I'll be focusing a lot of what I'm going to talk about.
I remember when I was DDGM trying to put together a message more than just what the Grand Master had provided and recite that every time I had a meeting. I was looking in a manuscript that was published from our Grand Lodge years ago, and we always talk about having issues with membership and attendance and memorization and all these things that seem like they're current issues. I would start off my speech by outlining this message from this ancient document. And I would ask the guys, so when do you think this was from? It sounds like it was just from this year, right? And of course it wasn't. It was from 1956. And so, you said this, same problems over and over again, it seems like sometimes.
Yeah, it's it is there's I was talking when we were in the green room earlier. We're talking about the Scottish Rite Master Craftsman program, and one of the things they do talk about is that concept of the wisdom of the ages. And I'm borrowing I'm inspired by a work that was written over 2,000 years ago. But guess what? The wisdom of the ages can be fairly recent. It could be as recent as, in your case, 50 years ago. Could be as recent as 10 years ago. Sometimes it's as recent as 2 minutes ago. It's amazing some of the things that we run into. But no, I think it's important that if we want to continue to advance the fraternity, and if we want to continue to do the things that we need to do to have Freemasonry be what it needs to be. I mean, you think about the fact that there was a period of time that in some societies, I look at my town, Puyallup, where I live. If you were a member of the city council, or if you were a police officer or a firefighter, you were a member of the Masonic Lodge. That's just how it was. And that wasn't an unusual thing back in the day. You had lodges that, if you worked on the docks, you were a member of this lodge over here. If you worked in the jewelry business, you were a member of this lodge over here, and so forth. And what you found was that, individuals who would become brothers would get together, and they would find ways to, manifest their Freemasonry by taking care of each other. So you never worried about that sort of thing. Over the course of time, a lot of that stuff has gone away, and as a result, one of the things that happens is that you lose your influence over time. I mean, David, we've been running around doing a lot of stuff with this Lansdowne portrait, this reproduction of the 1796 Lansdowne portrait, and we're going out to places. And for those lodges that have maintained those connections with their communities through how their lodges originally started, it's been great. But there are some lodges, they'll show up. They got a huge building in the middle of town, and they'll show up somewhere, and the people say, "You guys still exist?" There's just things that we have to do, because we can't be insular anymore. We have to understand that those who came before us, they did the things the idea was to set us on a path. And sadly, far too often, we've neglected what they gave us, and now we're kind of fighting back. Your lodge has done some great things, starting with doing the things you need to do to improve your building. because again, it's you know, you hear about the scholarships, right? You know, how we give out all this money in scholarships, and then these people show up at our buildings, and our buildings look like trash, and they wonder how are they going to afford to pay me?
Right.
It's like, you know, there's little things we can see. You guys have done some great things, and you guys are involved in the communities, are involved in the schools. You know, and you know, I've been down there, you know, on the community celebrations where you guys are in the parades, or where you're making the barbecue pork sandwiches. Little things like that. A lot of people, you know, forget that, you know, yeah, we wear tuxedos or kilts or whatever we do to manifest physically our Freemasonry, but you know something, you got to be out in the community. You've got to do those things. So, but you know, Mike, so my congratulations to you. But you know, I look at things like mentoring is the biggest thing. You know, you mentioned that you consider me a mentor, and I thank you so much for that. But you know, and Stephen, you talked about, you know, the idea of some of the traditions. Yeah, because yeah, we have to do more than just show somebody how to memorize an obligation.
Right.
You know, we do that too. It's, you know, we all tell us, okay, you're proved up, good. Now you're a Mason. No, you.
And then they go, now what?
Yeah. So there's things you got to do. So you know, so they have to meet other members of the lodge. As that seems silly, but think about this. How many times have you gone to lodge, you've sat down, and you look across the way, and you see the newest Master Mason, and he's sitting by himself?
Not in our lodge.
You know, you got that's part of that deal. You've got to have that connection. So you got to do that. And then of course you got to go out and see how other lodges do what they do, especially right after he's been raised.
Right.
Because guess what? You know, he's been seeing the degree from one perspective. Now he gets to see it from the perspective of a spectator. And that's really important, because that helps him with the catechism, but it also helps him see, okay, this is what's going on. Now I'm starting to develop a level of understanding. We got to introduce them to various sources of Masonic knowledge. These podcasts are wonderful, but you know, I've already talked about the master craftsmen that we have down here in the Southern Masonic jurisdiction of Scottish Rite. Steve, you were talking about an educational program that you guys have up in BC. Connor, I believe you were doing something like that as well. We got to talk about the various different Masonic organizations. Not so much to encourage them to join them now, but to kind of let them know, look, there's other ways of deepening your knowledge of the fraternity. You know, one of the greatest things that ever happened to me was, and you have my picture on your Facebook page, was that shortly after I was raised, I got a book in the mail from Bill Miller. Bill was one of my predecessors as Grand Master. Funny theory about Bill. Bill was the president of the school board when I went to Federal Way High School back in 1981. I can say probably with great confidence that I'm the only Grand Master to ever have his high school diploma signed by a Grand Master. I say that with great confidence. But you know, Bill sent me a book called A Pilgrim's Path, written by John Robinson, who at the time was a non-Mason, and he believed this book to be the best plain language example, the best plain language tome of the fraternity. And I found myself reading that often. I even loan it out to friends. I say, here's the thing. You're going to give it back to me because we're going to talk about it. And I think there's a brother kind of listening in, watching right now. He asked me, I'm overseas right now. What would you recommend for me to deepen my knowledge of the fraternity? I said, I don't know if it's still in print. Go to Amazon.com, find A Pilgrim's Path. Sure enough, he found it. Again, it was written by a non-Mason. And the cool thing about it was, at the end of the day, he joined the fraternity on his own research. So
yeah, when Lynn, my wife, was trying to learn more about Masonry, she said we could start a ladies' book club. And so I have a connection through the publisher of the Dummies series books, and we got a bunch of the Masons for Dummies books, and they started a class, and there were several ladies attending, and I was getting comments from the guys saying, "What is your wife teaching my wife?" Because they ask questions and they didn't know the answer to them. And I said, well, you better find out the answer if you don't know the answer. So it was great, because it wasn't just about Masonry, it was about the concordant organizations. And so I think they learned as much or more about it than I even knew. And so it was a really neat experience.
and that ties in line to the comment, we always hear, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. If we keep our masonry to ourselves and, we disappear on a Monday or a Wednesday, whatever day we disappear to in our tuxedo, whatever the case may be, and then we don't come back and talk about it, we're not going to get a whole lot of support, if the lodge wants us to do something, because, it's like, what's in it? What's in it for me? That kind of thing.
I remember one night after I entered apprentice degree, we had a nice agape. I think it was actually at Verity in Kent there. And the guy, they asked him if he had any questions. And he said, well, what can I tell my wife? Because, the impression is that everything's secret. And there's actually not a lot that's technically secret.
If I can ask you a question, Jim.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that in the photo you had the Pilgrim's Path.
Uh-huh.
But you also have Lemez and Schultz and Peanuts.
Yes.
What's the significance of those two books for you?
Real simple. The Schultz book, it's The Wisdom of Charles Schultz. I am a lifelong fan of Peanuts. That's right, Charlie Brown, Snoopy, the whole bit. And if you read the strips pretty closely, you're noticing that Charles Schultz is passing down a lot of wisdom. Little things that a lot of people don't think about. And I think a lot of it comes from his own, because Charles Schultz was personally insecure. But I think a lot of it comes from there. And so to be able to get a little bit more in depth about his wisdom was kind of cool for me. And as for Les Mis, if I look at it from a personal standpoint, Victor Hugo and I share the same birthday. But beyond that, the story of redemption that the story of Jean Valjean is something that's incredibly inspiring to me. Add to that, I'm a huge fan of musical theater, so guess what? I've seen Les Mis 7 times. I actually know the entire original libretto by heart. It's not unusual for me to either bust out into song or break out into a line. So those 3 books were kind of, I just wanted to have something a little different there, kind of give the brethren an idea as to what inspires me, what motivates me, what drives me.
So next time I'm in Washington, we're going to go see musical theater together.
We can make that happen.
You'd have to enjoy the date with his lovely wife Laura, and I know you and Laura enjoy that musical theater together and enjoy date nights in general. And they're very strong commitment. I really admire you for that. That when you set that time, that you focus on that and you don't break it, even if there's something happening. It's very admirable.
Well, thanks. Date night's kind of a big deal for me. Long time ago, I worked for American Express, and I was in the financial advisors division. And a bunch of us got to go back to Chaska, Minnesota for some advanced training. And the keynote speaker was Doug Lennox, who at the time was the executive vice president for financial advisors. And in his speech to us, he kept referring to his second wife. The whole time, kept referring to his wife as his second wife. And quite frankly, it was getting offensive, And all of a sudden, the dial changed. Because he said, you've probably heard me referring to my wife as my second wife. And I can tell that some of you are uncomfortable with that thought. Let me put in perspective. He says, that means that I have a failed marriage on my resume, and I'm not proud of that. And then one day when my wife called, now he changed it from second wife to wife. My wife called, and I had to apologize one more time for missing an important event, whether it be a little league game, a night out, whatever the case may be. As he was apologizing, he looked down at his calendar and saw an open time and blocked her out for a date. And that became date night. And again, his whole theory was that that you have to remember that you have a family. David, you made the comment during the green room. You have a family at home. Their time is valuable. Their time is meaningful. And you can't ignore that time. And so I took that to heart, because there were people in the room talking about, oh, I'm going to be successful. I'm going to work 80 hours and thinking, I'm seeing wedding rings on their hands. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, good luck with that. I don't know how that's going to hold. And it's the old line, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And one of the things that we can mentor our brethren on is, yes, there's a lot of opportunity in Freemasonry to do what you want to do. But don't forget, you've got responsibilities. You've got responsibilities at home. You got responsibilities with your faith. You have responsibilities with your job, especially if you're like David and I and you two who are still working. Things like we have responsibilities, and we have to keep those in mind, because if we don't, then all of a sudden this beautiful thing that we're in called masonry becomes something ugly to everyone else, and we can't have that.
Yeah, talking about commitments and things that you're passionate about that you do. Every year you have your fundraiser, Showcase for the Cure, and what an amazing event. I was fortunate to go a few years ago, and I've seen some video of the show last night. It actually happened last night, and what's so amazing, I recognize several of the faces in the videos, some local people, and what an amazing event. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Thank you, David, for that. As David mentioned, Laura is a breast cancer survivor. She's entered her 11th year of survivorship, so yay for that. But when we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do to give back, we had come to the realization we have a lot of friends who are musicians, very talented, very gifted, very incredible musicians. And we said, let's see if we can do this thing. So Zane McCune, who actually followed David as deputy of the Grand Master, I was fortunate enough to appoint Zane as one of my deputies, is a gifted pianist.
As a side note, Zane just subscribed to our YouTube channel. I just got the notification.
Yay! Yes, Zane's a very gifted pianist. He actually went to I want to make sure I get the right school, UPS, on a music scholarship. He's a banker now. Go figure. Any event, Zane and I are what we call yeah, we've got some musical talent, but we got professional lives. But it's nice to be able to dip back into that. So we started out, where are we going to hold it? And we held it at his brother's coffee shop, a soul food coffee house in Redmond. And we got together some people to see if they'd be willing to, for all intents and purposes, have a jam session to raise money for the fight against breast cancer. It has grown over the years. The lineups have changed, but the mission is still the same: to celebrate survivorship and remember those who have gone through music. And it's amazing the generosity of the performers, the generosity of those who attend. It's absolutely amazing. And Coleman likes to come to the event. The people who are the executives of Puget Sound Coleman, because they see this incredibly neat organic thing happening. And we do it, like I said, we do it every year, typically around Laura's birthday. One year actually held it on her birthday, so that was kind of fun. We typically hold it around her birthday, and it's just a great celebration. And of course, as an aside, one of the fun things of the event is something that we call "Will Jim hit the note?" Because yes, every so now and then I will either be very pitchy or I will miss the note. But thank God for Zane, because he does what he can to help me look good. So
I know, and the other thing that you're very passionate about that I'm not part of as a senior DeMolay or a past DeMolay, but I'm fortunate to be part of the local chapter and whatever way I can. And but our two co-hosts are my two compadres are past senior DeMolays, and so you'd have a lot in common with them. I was fortunate to attend some of, not all of, but some of the Conclave convention, the DeMolay convention that happened just this weekend in Washington, and what a great experience. The young man from our chapter, Sam Walker, just finished his term, and what a great year it was, and look forward to the new guys coming in and being part of that. So it's fun to see the young men grow from who they were to who they are and who they're becoming. And one of the things we've talked about in the past is, how we encourage those guys to consider masonry. We don't want to force them in, of course. We want to make it opportunistic for them and interesting to them, just like any man coming to the table. But if you want to share some of your background in DeMolay, and I'm sure Connor and Steve will have some comments along the way. They always have some DeMolay interest that I don't think about.
I just want to say that you're talking about going to Sam Walker's conclave, which is great. Sam Walker's one of the most amazing DeMolay I've ever met. But you missed my conclave.
I didn't know you then, Connor. I'm sorry.
But it was the first conclave BC DeMolay has had in like 10 years. Come on, man. Get on the bandwagon.
I did see that who it was that posted in White Rock, is it? They're having the...
Yeah, River Peatman is chairing that event.
Yeah, so there's a chance that we might have a small contingent come up for that, if that might be kind of.
I'll be at that. I might be getting something that day.
Well, if David's going to make the journey, I might just have to miss another event here in the Okanagan. I was debating going down for that, but it would be really cool to get a group picture together with everybody.
You should bring both gyms with you.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the banter. No, I joined DeMolay when I was 14. Joined Des Moines chapter, which has been reborn into Rainier chapter, and they meet a little further north now. But I didn't, as a kid, you're 14 years old, you're doing this thing, but I'm not quite sure what it's all about. But I was really impressed with the ceremonial stuff. I drew great attraction to that, primarily because this is kind of an open thing here. I have a stutter. I know you're just going, really? You do? Yeah, I have a stutter. It's pretty severe, actually. A lot of concentration, a lot of stuff in my head that allows me to kind of minimize it. But one of the ways that the stutter was, for lack of a better term, broken was because when I was a young kid in Catholic school, the nuns decided that young Mr. Mendoza was going to be the MC of the talent show. So the kid with the stutter is going to be in front of the microphone.
Perfect.
That not what you would call kind and gentle. So that's where I started. I think I'm sure that's probably where I started to develop my love for performance, because I realized that if I could commit dialogue to memory, I wouldn't have to worry about a stutter, because I knew what was going to be said and the pattern with which it had to be said. But I was drawn to that. I was drawn to the fact that there were kids that you would consider, quote unquote, the cool kid in school. You could tell they were, but they weren't I wasn't being banished to the far table, and that was kind of neat. Again, that's not something you see in a typical social setting, and so that kind of attracted me right away. I ended up becoming master counselor in my chapter in 1979. And back in those days, the DeMolay was pretty big in Washington. I remember my first conclave was held in Vancouver, Washington, and there were like 1,500 kids at the conclave. The only place that was big enough in Vancouver to hold us was the ice skating rink. So they actually had to, they had to put a floor on the ice skating rink. And now back in those days, back in those days, they had the, you guys, the Canadians, you get this. They had the yellow lights, right?
Yeah.
Yellow lights, didn't cause the ice to melt as quickly. Well, the dessert was chocolate pudding. So you can imagine this chocolate pudding under yellow lights. It looked terrible. And so we're all running outside to go under normal light to see if in fact was chocolate, because we didn't know what to think. But there was just something very impressive about that. And again, here I am in this room of 1,500 people, and no one is trying to elevate, with the exception, of course, of those individuals running for office. No one was trying to say, I'm the alpha male here. And that was really cool. And so it was so DeMolay held its attraction to me. I had a great dad advisor who believed in excellence, but also believed in having fun.
Makes the biggest difference, doesn't it?
Oh, it's a huge difference. Oh, and by the way, as another aside, I can also say with great confidence that I got to introduce when I was installed as deputy grandmaster, my dad advisor installed me.
Cool. Very cool.
So again, guys, again, here I am. I have a president of the school board and my dad advisor were involved in my very, very neat.
So you've got about as many years behind that gray hair as I do. Probably a couple more.
But, oh yeah, no, I get to take advantage of the 10% discount on the first Tuesday at the Fred Meyer. So.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you this. If it's as true for you as it is for me, I'm now 50 and about to be 51, and on my best friends list I think there might be 2 that are not senior DeMolays from my years in DeMolay. that brotherhood has really, it still exists all the way through this many years later, whether some have joined Masonry and some haven't, but they're still considered my closest, dearest friends today.
I'll take that a step further. I didn't join the fraternity until I was 34, for a variety of reasons. And then one day I get something in the mail from the committee to create Frank S. Land Lodge under dispensation. I saw the list of people, and I remembered all of these people from my youth, all of them. And so I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go to this dinner that they're having, because it was a Chevalier dinner. I'm going to go to this dinner. I'm going to find out what they're talking about. Maybe I'll come home with a petition. Maybe I won't. But we'll see. Suffice to say, I came home with a petition. And it was really kind of neat to be able to be part of that. And so,
does the Frank S. Land Lodge actually exist?
Pardon me?
Does the Frank S. Land Lodge exist now?
Frank S. Land number 313.
Can you send me a petition?
We can make that happen. I'll put it. Let me find a pen. You'll be surprised. Normally there's a pen right at my ready, but when we're doing this huge electrical remodel at my house this week, so we're like packing stuff up.
I have been wanting to join a lodge in Washington, and that sounds like the perfect lodge.
Yeah, Connor, send me you'll send me a Facebook message. I'll make it happen.
Because I need to join a fourth lodge.
But in any event, I'm actually the second person to take the degrees in the lodge. So being a charter initiate of that lodge is really kind of cool, and I was their first fully homegrown master. So
very cool.
Yeah, so
that's very cool.
So Frank S. Land is my home lodge. It's my home lodge. It's my mother lodge. It's something that I'm very, very proud of.
Is it entirely made up of senior DeMolays?
The large percentage of it. Large percentage of it is senior DeMolays, and those who aren't senior DeMolays are involved are involved in one of the youth groups.
Cool.
Bill White, who was one of the first to join, his wife was a Job's daughter. He never joined DeMolay, and now he's a member. He's a member of Frank S. Land, another past master, great guy, and we have a lot of that. But I'm just trying to think through the line that we have. I can't think of anybody who's been master of that lodge who either has not been a senior DeMolay or has not served a youth group. I can't think of one.
Well, that'd be, I don't know. Can somebody from outside, can a Canadian affiliate with an American lodge?
Yes.
The answer is yes. You just have to have a certificate of good standing.
I'm a member of a lodge in England. So if I can join a lodge in England, I can probably join a lodge in Washington.
Yeah. All you need is a certificate of good standing, and we got you covered.
All right. So, hey, I'm going to take a little pause here. We are an interactive podcast, and from our YouTube channel, Ernie Loisel has got a question here. What's that?
He was one of our co-hosts last week.
Yes, he was a co-host last week. We had a great time with him. His comment here is going back to Jim's comment of, what can I tell my wife? His comment is, I'd like to see a workshop type presentation for a lodge focusing on masonry for the family, as my lodge is putting something together for July. I'd like to hear what topics you would include.
Interesting, because one of the things that we do in our jurisdiction, we have an annual, I know it as a wardens conference, but a lot of lodge, it's now called the Lodge Leaders Retreat, because we want other officers involved as well, and we actually have a lot of combined sessions with the husband and wife there to talk about Freemasonry. So there's some basic things that we do. There's a lot of work, at least in Washington, that's considered monitorial. In other words, public work. So we'll share the public work. For example, the original example, the apron lecture is considered monitorial in my jurisdiction. And it's one thing to talk. It's one thing to put an apron on. It's another thing to explain what it means. And so the apron lecture is something that we talk about. So among the things we do is any ritual that's considered monitorial, we share that. We want our ladies and our families to know that this is not just a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Now, here's the caveat. If you're going to share the monitorial work, you better know what you're saying.
Right.
Okay? Because, and you just can't read it and say, well, what do you think?
Yes,
Yeah,
for sure.
One of my funnest times when I was mastering in the line of my lodge at our scholarship dinner, when I was emceeing that for the scholarships, I would close the event by doing the closing charge. I would explain what it was and perform the closing charge for the guests, the family, and the superintendent, and the mayor, and everybody that was in attendance, and it was really fun.
Yeah. Now, the number one thing you can't do is, and again, I know I'm going to get a little bit of blowback on this one, but I'm comfortable saying this. You can't turn it into a recruiting bit for the other organizations. Okay? If it's just like we come to Freemasonry on our own free will and accord. If your lady or your family wants to go to these these other organizations, they've got to go there on their own free will and accord as well. You
Right.
can't make it look like a recruiting thing. That's the one thing you can't do. But I think David's wife was pretty great about the idea of having a book club. Getting a book like Pilgrim's Path or getting a book like Freemasons for Dummy or The Idiot's Guide to Dummy, and kind of going, okay, let's talk about the fraternity. I think a lot of your topics can be right in there. Here's a fun topic that I saw. Why do Masons love Scotch? There's an actual webpage written. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a webpage written by that's written by Mason's lady, where she talks about some of the questions that people would have about what the Masons do. One of them is, why do Masons love Scotch? I'm going to see if I can find that website really fast here, so that way I can share that. But again, a whole list of topics about that you can create. But again, the thing that you've got to do is the stuff that's monitorial. Share that. The books that are out there, share those. Those book clubs can do wonderful, or are wonderful at getting information out. Talk about installation, because guess what? You're going to want your all of a sudden your spouse is going to be thrust into things, right? And it's like, or your family's going to be thrust into things. It's like, what's this all about? You're not, you're just not, that this is something that's going on, and you have to share that with it. You have to share what that installation is all about. And the other thing is, the history of the fraternity. And I'm not talking about King Solomon. Don't go there. I'm talking about those individuals who are Masons who have been president. That's a great topic. That's a great topic to talk about. Military leaders, community leaders, leaders of industry. These are things that you can share with with your family, and you should share with your family, because guess what? The fact that we are all Masonically connected to George Washington is a big deal, right? By the way, tomorrow is the anniversary of his inauguration as president. So,
cool. Yeah, one of the things that we've done is we try to have more social events so that they can include the spouses, and we're making them very regular so that we figure the more opportunities we create for them to be able to connect, the better our chances are of strengthening the brotherhood outside of the lodge room.
Yeah.
And the women that are coming out and interacting, some of them get into, why, what are the things we do and what can they know? The others, they're just happy to, see us be busy up until summertime, and then they're wanting us to, slow it down.
One other thing, if you're going to have a dinner, don't have the ladies cook it.
Yeah, no, don't have.
If you're gonna have that, I've seen that happen. I actually saw a lot to do. There was a Valentine's Day thing, and the ladies did the cooking and the cleaning. Oh my Lord! By the way, the website is themasonslady.com.
If you're gonna want someone to do the cleaning and stuff, why don't you donate $100 to your local DeMolay chapter and ask them to do it?
Exactly. So again, by the way, the website is themasonslady.com. It's really kind of funny, but. Cool. I love that one blog goes, why do that's what's entitled again, an introduction to Scotch. and they have a nice detail about Scotch. It's actually pretty good.
Ernie's got another comment here. Agreed. It's not only about the ritual, but also about the expectations of members and the work. And working the compromise of sharing your family time, especially if a man's aspirations are for the Grand Lodge office.
Yeah, interesting that you talk about aspirations. I tell people point blank that my only dream when I became a Mason was to be master of my lodge. I just wanted to be master of my lodge. The pathway of becoming Grandmaster for me was something that kind of happened. I don't want to say as a matter of course, but there were just things that were happening in my life that directed me that way. I had been appointed to multiple committees. I'd been appointed, I'd been granted collars and so forth. And I grew up, at least for me, that if you're given responsibility, then you better live up to those responsibilities because someone is watching you. Because if you don't live up to it, you're not going to get the next responsibility, whatever quote unquote aspirations you may have. It's the old line, and it's kind of trite, but it's very true. The man doesn't seek the office seeks the man.
Yeah, I actually had no aspirations to take any office. When I joined Masonry, my only aspiration was to do more memory work, right? And I figured there'd be a lot of it to be done, right? And I joined an ancient lodge because I heard that, I could act things out much like we did in DeMolay. And of course, that became true as well. Ernie has the ultimate answer. Masons like Scotch because it helps wash down the peanuts.
I thought he was going to say it helps to wash down the haggis, but hey, that's another issue all its own.
That's on Robbie Burns night.
I do have an offline comment. Our good friend Zane is still watching, but he's traveling to a client meeting, and he texted me a question. He asked to kind of bring it back to our original conversation. He was asking what advice would Jim give to older Masons about new ideas that younger Masons have, and vice versa.
Oh, actually, that's a really good question, and that's actually going to be part of my presentation. To the brethren, down in Oregon. I think the number one thing that we always hear is we tried that and it failed. Okay, so that's great, but what were the dynamics back then? The dynamics are from month to month, week to week, year to year. Dynamics change. Different people come in. Different ways of doing things come in. Just because it wasn't successful back then doesn't mean it can't be successful today. And we're seeing that everywhere. Lodges are reinventing themselves, and in many cases, they're reinventing themselves to what they were when they first started. And when we say it won't work because we tried that, that's incredibly dismissive of somebody who wants to bring something to the table. And we talk about membership. People forget that the other word to that is membership retention. You don't retain anyone when you dismiss them, so you can't be dismissive. The other thing that I would share with quote unquote an older Mason, and an older Mason shared this with me, is that when he said to me, he goes, "I'm here if you need me." Okay. This man has a lot of knowledge, and all I have to do is ask him. All right. Okay. So to the older Mason, I would say simply this: you have a lot of knowledge. Be willing to share, not force, share. I look at the fact that I'm 56 right now, and I've made it very clear to my lodge that I don't want to be quote unquote that guy. You don't talk about, the guy who knows everything, the guy who can do everything, I don't really want to be that guy. I want to be here to help. I want to be here to be able to advance my Worshipful Master's agenda. I want to be able to help the next person who's coming up behind. I'm not going to force myself. All they have to do is ask. And I think it's, because again, go back to the comment I made at the very beginning, the wisdom of ages. The wisdom of ages is out there. And so, yes, it's one thing for the younger person to tap into it. And when they ask the older person, please be ready to share some of your wisdom, because guess what? When you're gone, you take it with you. And you can't lose that.
To expand on that a little bit, don't only be willing to share it, pay attention to see if you can identify those who need it. Like, just because the guy's going in as worshipful master doesn't mean he's got the experience to do the job.
Mm-hmm.
He might need a little help. He might need a little coaching and a little mentoring, a little bit of push in the right direction of getting certain things done in a timely fashion. And it's not that they're ill prepared. It's that that's a busy year. That's a lot of pressure for a lot of guys. And, as things change and evolve, new things are out there and available for us now. And, I would, I'd also like the older membership to just be aware that, change can be good. Like, for example, the text message program I run in the Okanagan here, a couple of years ago, we stand up in lodge and we talk about the text message program and how many guys have smartphones. You might see 5 or 6 guys putting their hands up. Now you might find 5 or 6 guys who don't have a smartphone. And now, we've gone from having 40 guys on the text message program to 108, and it just keeps growing. So be open-minded.
I would also say too that, when I was coming in, I didn't necessarily know what questions to ask. And so that can come back for a new guy too. Or they may ask a question of an older guy that's a little maybe grumpy or something, and he gets an answer that is a little bit abrasive. And so then it detracts him from wanting to ask more or ask again. So it can be, want to make sure that we pass on that knowledge. I mentioned in my comment that Jim mentioned in the green room at Grand Lodge when I delivered a message about long-range planning, that when I joined Masonry, I just assumed there's this ancient fraternity, and I just assumed there was going to be this regular course of education, maybe Saturday mornings at 8 o'clock for the next week or every month or whatever it was. And when it didn't happen, then that became my expectation, that there isn't this regular course of education. And that there's always the idea that you have to go and seek it, and I understand that, but it would be nice to have a little bit more structured education format. And so that's something I'm working on with my worship master to develop. We already have the tools are already in place. That in our Grand Lodge we have the Canada Education Program, and then there's Lodge Officers Training, and there's the Code, of course, and then as Most Worshipful mentioned, the Scottish Rite Program would be a great segue into the next level.
Yeah, you have to the important thing about education is this: if we don't have that, then we're just another social club. There's more to, don't get me wrong, I love the social aspect of Freemasonry. I get to interface with people that I would not normally interface with on a pretty regular basis. So to be, so to be able to, to be able to talk with a retired lieutenant colonel from the Air Force, like Dave, you get to do with our good friend Al Jorgensen, to talk with a Boeing engineer, to talk with you guys. That's not something that you typically get to do in quote unquote day-to-day life. You get that's a special privilege that you get with Freemasonry. So, yes, there is that neat social aspect, but there's the lessons that they can impart. And guess what? A lot of these older guys are also willing to be teachers. They love teaching classes. Now, the big thing we all have to be careful of, because, we're also asked to teach things simply this, that we don't come off as scoldy. We can't really scold somebody, because if we do, guess what? It dampens the message. If not, just kind of wipes out the message. We have to make sure that, okay, we're here to impart knowledge. What is it called? Whisper good counsel. Not scream down someone's throat. But whisper good counsel. Let them know. Maybe you should have tried this, because guess what? The way you did it, it didn't come off well.
May I add my thoughts on this topic?
Please do.
My father was a Mason, and he ended up leaving Freemasonry because someone kept trying to give him advice in a way that was unproductive. So, for instance, he told me a story of when he was chaplain. So I think he was doing like one of the prayers or something. And after the meeting, someone came up to him and told him, you missed this word. Like you were one word off. Or kept coming up to him and kept... And I assume this brother had the best in mind of what he was trying to do. He was trying to help my dad be a better Mason. But the way that he did it came across as scalding. And that drove my father away from the craft. Now, I've had experiences on the other side of things. Like there's one particular Mason who is a past Grand Zerubbabel of Royal Arch. He's a past Grand Steward of Grand Lodge of BC. He's a really good friend of mine. He's a charter member of one of the lodges down in Washington. I can't remember which lodge, but anyway, he also runs a website called The Educator, which is a fantastic website filled with Masonic information. And he's actually one of the two reasons that I ended up joining Royal Arch. He was one of my sponsors. And I know that there's at any point in time, like I could pick up my phone right now and call him and be like, why again do we wear white leather and aprons? Oh, right, it has to do with this. And he's super helpful, and he's the type of guy who I could call and ask the most stupid question or ask the most advanced question. And he would answer it in a really positive way and he would help me understand things without making me feel stupid. And I really think, kind of talking about the Great Oaks from earlier, I really think that's important that as Masons and as Master Masons, we are given the right, and I would almost say the duty, to correct and inform other Masons. But it's really important that we do that in a way that is productive. Otherwise, in the case of my dad, it can push away brothers who, in my incredibly biased opinion, are fantastic people.
So there's no bias at all. It's factual. We see it all the time. I know I can think of a half a dozen community leaders who I know are Masons, but I've never seen in lodge. And I know they went to the degrees. I know they've done that. I know a story of an artist who joined lodge, and he was so enamored with the second degree that he painted this beautiful staircase. And then one brother said, you got these two things backwards. Wow. Guess what? You don't see that guy in lodge anymore.
Yeah.
That's a big shame.
I often talk to
the past Grandmaster makes this comment. Not only do we shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes, but you know what we do? We look at the other foot, take aim.
I often say to new guys, I said, unfortunately, we have a habit of teaching by correction rather than by instruction. And so I said, just be careful. There may be we're pretty good in our particular lodge that we don't have we call them crotchety past masters, or the guys that are upset about things. But sometimes a guy will get some instruction, like Connor mentioned, that's rough, and they get turned off. And so a very good friend of mine, and Jim knows him, Steve Stewart. He's a dad advisor for our chapter and has become a great friend. He gave me some advice when he's an elementary school teacher, and he said, kids, I was asking him, I don't have boys, and so I was asking him, how can I relate to the guys? And he said, they don't remember anything except the last thing you told them generally. And always try to make it a positive comment. And so that always plays in my mind every time if I stand up, if they ask me for comments at the end, or if I'm talking to a young man or even a Mason, anybody, I always play in that exact phrase in my head. How can I end this conversation on a positive note?
Well, it's like Steve and I. I'll tell Steve that he's a crockety old bastard, and one of the
That's just his youth speaking.
one of the ugliest people I've ever met. But, at the end of our conversations, I'll be like, hey, man, really, I'm glad we talked. I really appreciate the information you've given me. You ugly old bastard.
Yeah, well, this ugly old fart has a new line that I've recently. I mean, I've been saying it for years. I've repeated many lectures, and this line is so famous. But to the new guys coming in, I think it's so important that we remind them that our lessons are illustrated by symbols and veiled in allegory. And so, if they want to learn what it is, what the secrets are, and what fraternity has to teach, pay attention. Pay attention to every word, everything, all our rituals. They have meaning. There is something behind each piece done. And if you wonder about what a piece might mean, ask. And I'll guarantee you, if the guy you ask doesn't know, he'll find somebody who does.
Absolutely.
Absolutely right.
But I will say right now that I think that Steve's face is a little bit more attractive than mine. Mine's a bit scuffed up today, which is why I'm not showing you my face today.
Oh, battle scars. You just can't see them all because they faded and they're a little,
Well, I just want to say thank you so much to Most Worshipful for joining us today. It's been a really spectacular program, and
My pleasure.
want to offer any last opportunity for comments or anything.
Yeah.
It's been really great.
Yeah,
Well-
I think that if we can let Jim wrap up with the last things here, and we can close up the podcast on a positive note. And again, I also would like to thank everybody for their time and remind everybody out there, if you like it, please review it. It helps us with our ratings.
So if I may, the last thing I'd like to share with everyone is that when I was Grandmaster, my theme was be the difference. Still is my personal theme. And what be the difference means, at least to me, is simply this. Each of us as Masons and as individuals are given opportunities to make things in our little corner of the world just a little bit better. I think Roberto Clemente said it best. If you're not spending your life trying to make a difference, you are wasting your life. We have this wonderful gift, Freemasonry, that has given us an incredible opportunity to do what we can do to make, again, our little corners of the world a little bit better. Let's not waste the gift. Let's do what we can to make our corners of the world a little bit better, and let's in fact be that difference. And again, to you guys at the Working Tools podcast, I thank you so very much for the opportunity to share the day with you.
And we thank you for your wise words and experience, and for making the time to come on and share that with our global world here on YouTube.
And naturally, my brother, anytime you want to come on again, you are always welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Excellent. And on that note, guys, I'm going to hit the kill switch, and you all have a great rest of your day out there in YouTube land.
Before we go, Steve, I believe we have an exciting announcement about our next week's guest.
Yeah, we'll let David do that.
Well, we're very fortunate to have expanded our Washington presence on the podcast. I know this is a BC, Vancouver-based podcast, but I'm being from Washington. I'm slowly working our way into adding more Washington Masons, and we're very fortunate next week to have our Most Worshipful Grand Master, Jim Kendall, will be our guest next Monday.
Who wears a fantastic kilt, I must say. I didn't make it, all the more shame, but it's still a fantastic kilt. And yeah, we're super excited to have Most Worshipful Brother Jim Kendall, or the Grand Master of Washington. And another thing, for anyone out there, we may have started in BC and we may be expanding to take over Washington. But, we are wanting to be an international podcast. So if you are a member of the Grand Lodge of Brazil, or the Grand Lodge of Florida, or the Grand Lodge of, I don't know, what's that new Grand Lodge that New York just instituted? Jordan, is it? The Grand Lodge of Jordan? And you want to be on our podcast, send us a message. And we would love to have as many different people on, because I think our niche has become that we're kind of like a talk show podcast. We love having people from other different Grand Lodges on, because it is those individual brothers from all around the world that really bring color to the craft. So if you're interested in coming on and joining us for a conversation, let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
That's the Working Tools Podcast at gmail.com.
There you go.
All right, guys. Have a great rest of your day out there in podcast land.
Talk to you later, brothers.
Bye now.